For 6 agonizing months she weathered a storm of quiet cruelty in her own home. Every sigh from her millionaire husband, every glance at her changing body was a fresh wound. He called her lazy, undisciplined, a disappointment. His beautiful, venomous mistress echoed his disdain, her sharp whisper at a glittering party, becoming Elara's mantra of shame, just eat less, darling. They tried to break her, to shrink her down to nothing. But what they didn't know, what no one could have ever imagined, was the monumental secret her body was holding. A secret that wasn't just about to be revealed, but was about to be born. The silence in the Blackwood mansion was a living entity. It breathed in the cavernous spaces between the marble floors, and the vaulted ceilings coiled around the legs of bespoke furniture and settled like a fine dust on Elara's spirit. It was a wealthy silence, the kind that costs millions to create soundproofed walls, sprawling grounds that pushed the noise of the world away, and a husband who had long since stopped filling the quiet with words of love. Damien Blackwood had built his empire on predicting trends in the volatile world of tech. He saw the future in lines of code and market fluctuations. Yet he couldn't see the woman sitting across from him at the 20-foot-long dining table. Or rather, he saw her all too clearly, and he didn't like the current trend. "The charity gala is next week," he said, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. He didn't look up from his tablet, where stock prices flickered in green and red. "I trust you found something appropriate to wear." Elara's hand paused on its way to her water glass. The word hung in the air, appropriate. It was a loaded term, a euphemism for something that doesn't make you look fat. "I was thinking the navy blue silk gown," she offered, her voice soft, tentative. "The one from last year." He finally looked up, his steel gray eyes sweeping over her with the dispassionate air of an auditor. "I doubt that will be a viable option now, will it? It was a snug fit then." The jab landed precisely where it was intended. Elara felt the familiar heat of shame creep up her neck. It had started subtly a few months ago. A comment here, a suggestion there. "Are you sure you want dessert, Ellie? Maybe we should have the trainer come to the house more often." Now the subtlety was gone, replaced by a blunt, dismissive cruelty. Elara looked down at her plate. A simple grilled chicken breast and a handful of steamed asparagus. It was all she allowed herself for dinner these days, yet the number on the scale remained stubbornly high, and a strange, persistent exhaustion had become her constant companion. Her clothes felt tight, her body felt foreign, swollen and slow. She was 29 years old, married to a man the world saw as a titan of industry, living a life that was the stuff of fairy tales. But inside the gilded cage, the princess was withering. "I'll go shopping tomorrow," she murmured, pushing the asparagus around her plate. "Good," Damien said, his attention already back on his tablet. "And Elara, try to show some restraint. The cameras are everywhere at that event. Appearances matter." He tapped the screen with finality. "My brand depends on it." His brand. Not their life, not their marriage. His brand. Later that night, Elara stood before the full-length mirror in their cavernous walk-in closet. The closet itself was bigger than her first apartment. Racks of designer clothes, walls of shoes, drawers lined with velvet for glittering jewels. It was a temple of excess, yet all she felt was a profound sense of lack. She turned to the side, her hands tracing the gentle curve of her stomach. It wasn't the flat-toned midsection of the woman Damien had married. She had always been slender, effortlessly so. But in the last half-year, her body had begun to betray her. She felt bloated and achy, and no amount of dieting or listless jogging on the state-of-the-art treadmill seemed to make a difference. She was just tired, so deeply, bone-achingly tired. She thought back to their beginning. Damien had been a whirlwind of ambition and charm. He'd pursued her relentlessly, captivated by her work as a budding art restorer. He'd loved her passion, her delicate touch, the way she saw beauty in things others had discarded. He had promised her the world. He had delivered the cage. Her career was a distant memory now. Damien had insisted it was unnecessary for her to work. "Your job is to support me," he'd said, And like a fool in love, she had agreed. She had traded her brushes and solvents for silent lunches and charity committees. A notification pinged on Damien's phone left charging on his bedside table. Elara's heart gave a familiar painful lurch. She knew she shouldn't, but the silence of the house and the hollowness in her chest urged her forward. She picked it up. The screen lit up with a message preview. Isabel. Can't wait for the gala. Make sure your +1 doesn't embarrass you this time. Kisses. Isabel Vance. The name was as sharp and sleek as the woman herself. She was the head of PR for Damien's company, a woman with a shark smile and eyes that missed nothing. She was everything Elara wasn't, any more ambitious, driven, and rail-thin. Her public image was flawless, her social media a curated gallery of success and glamour. And for the past 6 months, Elara had harbored the certain suspicion that Isabel was sleeping with her husband. The message wasn't just a confirmation. It was a declaration of war. Your +1. Elara was no longer a wife, a partner. She was an accessory, one that was apparently becoming a liability. A wave of dizziness washed over her so intense she had to grip the marble vanity to steady herself. Her reflection swam before her eyes. The woman in the mirror looked pale and lost her eyes wide with a pain that went far beyond a simple text message. It was the crushing weight of her reality. She was trapped, and the walls were closing in one cruel word, one dismissive glance at a time. The exhaustion she felt wasn't just physical. It was the weariness of a soul giving up. She pressed a hand to her stomach again, a sudden inexplicable feeling of something. A flutter. Probably just hunger, she told herself grimly. After all, she needed to eat less. The week leading up to the Digital Future Foundation Gala was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Damien treated Elara with a cloying performative concern that was somehow more painful than his usual neglect. He'd have the chef prepare her special low-calorie meals and announce it to her at the dinner table. He'd leave pamphlets for elite fitness retreats on her pillow. Each gesture was a thinly veiled insult, a public service announcement that she was failing in her primary duty to be a beautiful, effortless reflection of his own success. Elara, meanwhile, moved through the days in a fog. The fatigue had deepened, settling into her bones like a permanent winter. Some mornings she felt so nauseous she could barely lift her head. She blamed it on stress and malnutrition, a vicious cycle of her own making. The strange flutters in her abdomen continued, fleeting and unpredictable, like phantom muscle spasms. The night of the gala arrived, cloaked in a chilling drizzle that mirrored the dread in Elara's heart. She had bought a new gown, a deep emerald velvet creation. The stylist had praised its forgiving silhouette, another polite dagger to the ribs. It was beautiful, expensive, and it felt like a shroud. As she descended the grand staircase, Damien was waiting at the bottom, looking immaculate in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He gave her a slow, critical once-over. "It'll have to do," he said, his lips tightening into a bloodless line. He offered his arm, his touch as cold and hard as a statue's. The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a dazzling spectacle of New York's tech and finance elite. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears, and the air buzzed with forced laughter and the clinking of champagne flutes. Elara felt like a ghost haunting a party she didn't belong to. She smiled, she nodded, she sipped her water, her hand protectively, unconsciously resting on her lower stomach. And then she saw her. Isabel Vance was holding court near the towering ice sculpture of a swan. She was a vision in molten silver, a dress so form-fitting it seemed poured onto her body. She was laughing, her head tilted back, a possessive hand resting on the arm of a tech billionaire Elara vaguely recognized. But her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were scanning the room. They landed on Elara and Damien, and a slow, triumphant smile spread across her perfectly painted lips. For an hour, Elara managed to avoid her. She drifted between conversations, a polite, smiling satellite to her husband's star. But Damien, as if on a mission, eventually steered them directly into Isabel's orbit. "Isabel, you look stunning." Damien boomed, his voice oozing a charm Elara hadn't heard directed at her in years. "Damien, darling," Isabel purred, detaching herself from the billionaire and gliding towards them. She air-kissed Damien, her eyes flickering over to Elara. "And Elara, how comfortable you look." The insult was as exquisitely tailored as her gown. Comfortable. The word used to describe old sweaters and sensible shoes, not a couture gown at a high society gala. "It's velvet," Elara said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can see that," Isabel said, her smile never faltering. She leaned in, creating a bubble of false intimacy, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss, meant only for Elara, though Damien was close enough to hear every word. "You know, darling, I know a fantastic nutritionist, truly a miracle worker. But honestly, the secret is so simple." Elara felt her blood run cold. She wanted to turn and walk away to flee the suffocating heat of the ballroom and the cold fire of Isabel's malice. But she was frozen, pinned by the woman's predatory gaze. Isabel took a delicate sip of her champagne. Her eyes locked on Elara's over the rim of the glass. Then she delivered the final devastating blow. "Just eat less. It's not that hard." The words, though whispered, seemed to echo in the sudden silence of Elara's world. They were the distilled essence of every cruel comment from Damien, every judgmental stare, every ounce of her own self-loathing. In that moment, Isabel wasn't just a mistress. She was the embodiment of Elara's deepest insecurities. Damien, standing right there, did nothing. He simply offered a tight, non-committal smile, as if Isabel had just commented on the weather. His silence was not just complicity, it was an endorsement. He agreed. Something inside Elara snapped. It wasn't loud or explosive, but a quiet, seismic fracture of her spirit. The room suddenly felt hot, airless. The glittering light swam before her eyes, and the buzz of conversation became a deafening roar. "Excuse me," she managed to choke out. She turned, not waiting for a response, and fled. She pushed through the crowds of laughing, drinking strangers, her emerald gown a blur of motion. She didn't stop until she reached the relative anonymity of the ladies' lounge. She collapsed onto a plush velvet settee, her body trembling. The nausea that had been a dull hum all week crescendoed into a powerful wave. She barely made it to the pristine, gold-fixtured stall before she was violently ill. As she knelt on the cold marble floor, her body convulsing, she wasn't thinking about Damien's betrayal or Isabel's cruelty. A new, terrifying thought was taking root. This wasn't just stress. This wasn't just a weight problem. The persistent fatigue, the swelling, the nausea, the strange flutters that felt more and more distinct each day. It was adding up to something else, something her mind, conditioned by months of psychological abuse, had refused to consider. Wiping her mouth with a trembling hand, she looked at her reflection in the polished gold of the toilet paper holder. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying, and yet strangely hopeful realization. She needed to see a doctor. Not a nutritionist, not a personal trainer, a real doctor. And she needed to do it without Damien knowing. Her life, she was starting to understand, might depend on it. Returning from the gala was like entering the Arctic Circle. Damien's silence was glacial. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't mention her abrupt departure. He simply stripped off his tuxedo, tossing the expensive jacket onto a chair with disdain, his every movement radiating a cold fury. "You embarrassed me tonight, Elara," he finally said, his back to her as he stood before the vast window overlooking the sleeping city. "I was ill," she replied, her voice small but steady. She was huddled on her side of the king-sized bed, the velvet gown still on, feeling too exhausted to move. "You were weak," he shot back, turning to face her. His face was a mask of contempt. "Isabel makes a simple, helpful suggestion and you fall apart. You create a scene. Do you have any idea how that looks?" "A helpful suggestion?" Elara's voice rose, edged with a disbelief that bordered on hysteria. "She told me to starve myself, Damien, in front of you, and you just stood there." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," he scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. She was being honest. It's what friends do. God knows you don't have any of those left to tell you the truth. "She sees what I see." You've let yourself go. And tonight you proved you don't have the discipline to handle it." Each word was a hammer blow against the fragile shield around her heart. She sees what I see. He wasn't just ignoring the cruelty. He was aligning himself with it. He and Isabel were a team, and Elara was the project they were failing to fix. This was her breaking point. The quiet fracture from the gala became a complete shattering break. The love she had once held for him, the hope she had clung to it all, evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. She was utterly alone in this marriage. The next morning, while Damien was out for a meeting, he'd pointedly told her was with Isabel to run damage control on your little episode. Elara made the call. She didn't use the concierge doctor service Damien had on retainer. This had to be hers alone. She searched online for a highly rated OB/GYN clinic on the Upper East Side, far from their usual network of providers. She found a Dr. Anya Sharma at a discreet professional practice, the Prive Medical Clinic. The name felt like a small act of rebellion. This was for her, private. She booked an appointment for the following afternoon using her maiden name and paying with a personal credit card she hadn't used in years. The simple act of doing so felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. The hours until the appointment were a blur of anxiety. She feigned a headache to avoid Damien staying in her room, the excuse all too believable given her constant state of malaise. She felt a powerful primal urge to protect the secret growing within her, a secret she was still not even sure was real. It was a flickering candle of hope in the vast darkness of her life, and Damien and Isabel were the gale-force winds threatening to extinguish it. That evening the atmosphere was thick with unspoken animosity. Damien ate in his study. Elara picked at a salad in the empty dining room. Around 10 p.m. he came to their bedroom. He didn't get ready for bed. He stood by the door, his arms crossed, a judge about to deliver a sentence. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice dangerously calm, "about us, about this situation." Elara waited, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. "This isn't working," he continued. "Your lack of effort, your attitude. It's affecting my focus, my business. It's a drain. So I'm giving you an ultimatum." He paused for effect, letting the word hang in the air between them. "I've booked you a 2-month stay at a wellness retreat in Switzerland. It's the best in the world. They'll get your diet, your fitness, your everything back on track. You'll leave at the end of the week." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an expulsion. He was shipping her off to be fixed, so he could have 2 uninterrupted months with Isabel. The cold, calculated cruelty of it stole her breath. "And if I say no?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. Damien's expression hardened. "Then you can find your own wellness retreat, Elara. Permanently. I will not have my life and my reputation dragged down by a wife who refuses to take care of herself. The choice is yours. Get well on my terms or don't come back at all." He turned and walked out, closing the door with a soft final click that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Elara didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The ultimatum meant to break her had the opposite effect. It solidified her resolve into something akin to steel. He had just handed her a deadline. He thought he was giving her a choice between compliance and exile. But he had unknowingly given her something far more valuable, a reason to fight back with everything she had. She clutched her stomach. The flutters felt stronger now, more insistent. Hang on, she thought, a silent promise to the unknown life within her. Just hang on. I'm coming. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, at her appointment, she would get the truth. And the truth, she suspected, would be her weapon. The next day, Elara moved like a spy in her own home. She dressed in simple, anonymous clothes, a pair of dark jeans that were uncomfortably tight and a loose cashmere sweater. She told the household staff she was going to the Met for the day, an old pastime she hadn't indulged in for years, making it a plausible lie. She took a taxi, not the house car, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs for the entire journey to the Prive Medical Clinic. The clinic's waiting room was calm and discreet. A world away from the opulent but cold interiors of her life. Soft gray walls, tasteful art, quiet classical music. It was a sanctuary. When a nurse called Ms. Sterling, her maiden name Elara, felt a jolt of her old self, the woman who existed before she became Mrs. Blackwood. Dr. Anya Sharma was a woman in her late 40s with warm, intelligent eyes and a reassuring smile. She listened patiently as Elara, stumbling, at first recounted her symptoms, the fatigue, the nausea, the weight gain that defied diet and exercise, the swelling in her hands and feet. She left out the parts about her husband and his mistress. This wasn't about them. This was about her. "And when was your last menstrual period, Ms. Sterling?" Dr. Sharma asked, making notes. Elara froze. With the stress, the travel, the emotional turmoil, she had completely lost track. She thought back, her mind a frantic blur. I don't know. 3 months ago, maybe 4, I thought it was just the stress." Dr. Sharma's expression remained professional, but her eyes held a new knowing light. "All right, Elara," she said, her tone gentle. "Why don't we get you into a gown and we'll do an ultrasound? I think that will give us the clearest picture of what's going on." Lying on the examination table in the darkened room, Elara's anxiety reached a fever pitch. The ultrasound gel was cold on her stomach. She stared at the ceiling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, bracing herself for, she didn't know what, confirmation that she was pregnant. News of a tumor. Anything felt possible. Dr. Sharma moved the transducer across her belly, her eyes fixed on the black and white monitor. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the machine. Elara watched the doctor's face, trying to read her expression. A frown flickered across her features, followed by a look of intense concentration. "Well," Dr. Sharma said slowly, her voice filled with a strange mixture of professionalism and awe. "There is definitely a reason for your symptoms." Elara held her breath. Am I pregnant?" Dr. Sharma smiled, a wide, genuine smile that transformed her face. "Oh yes, you are most certainly pregnant." She turned the monitor so Elara could see. A grainy black and white world appeared, and within it a tiny, flickering pulse of light. A heartbeat. Tears sprang to Elara's eyes, hot and immediate. A single overwhelming wave of relief and love washed over her. A baby. A tiny secret piece of life that was hers and hers alone. It was real. But, wait. Dr. Sharma said, her focus returning to the screen. She maneuvered the wand slightly. "That's interesting." Elara's brief moment of joy was instantly replaced with fear. "What is something wrong?" "No, not wrong," the doctor murmured, almost to herself. She zoomed in on one area of the screen, then another. "Just unexpected." She took a deep breath. "Elara, I want you to look closely at the screen. Do you see this little flicker here?" "Yes," Elara whispered. "The heartbeat." "Correct," said Dr. Sharma. "Now, look over here." She shifted the transducer again. Another distinct flicker appeared in a different part of the dark uterine sac. Elara stared, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "Is that another one?" "It is." Dr. Sharma confirmed, a note of wonder in her voice. "You're having twins." Twins. The word echoed in the small dark room. Elara's mind reeled. 2 babies. She laughed, a giddy, tearful sound. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. Damien would be furious, but then he would see the value in 2 heirs at once. Maybe, just maybe, this would change everything. But Dr. Sharma wasn't done. Her brow was still furrowed in concentration. She was scanning a third area of the screen, her movements slow and deliberate. Elara's laughter died in her throat. "Doctor, what is it?" Dr. Sharma was silent for a long moment. She put down the transducer, took a deep breath, and turned to face Elara fully. Her professional demeanor was softened by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. "Elara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been doing this for 20 years and I can count on one hand the number of times I've said this. Are you seeing this?" She pointed a steady finger at the monitor. 1, 2. Her finger moved to a third unmistakable pulse of light. And 3. She turned up the volume on the machine. The room was suddenly filled with a sound that would be imprinted on Elara's soul for the rest of her life. The rapid, thundering, whooshing sound of not one, not two, but 3 distinct, powerful heartbeats all beating in a wild, miraculous symphony inside of her. Triplets. The word didn't even register at first. It was too big, too impossible. Elara stared at the screen at the 3 tiny lives flickering within her, and the world tilted on its axis. All the fatigue, the sickness, the swelling, it all made a terrifying, beautiful sense. She wasn't just gaining weight, she was growing a family. The ultimatum from Damien Isabel's venom, the months of shame. It all seemed to shrink into insignificance, dwarfed by the monumental reality on the screen. This wasn't a problem to be fixed or a secret to be ashamed of. This was a miracle. Her miracle. A fierce primal wave of protective love surged through her so powerful it eclipsed every other emotion. These weren't Damien's heirs to be used for his brand. These were her babies, her treasures, her reason. They're okay, she asked, her voice trembling with the force of her emotions. Their heart rates are strong. Dr. Sharma said, her voice regaining its composure though her eyes still shone with amazement. You're about 18 weeks along by my estimate. A multiple pregnancy of this order is extremely high risk, Elara. We need to get you on a strict regimen of care immediately. You are not gaining weight. You are nourishing 3 human beings. You need to eat more, not less. You need complete rest. Eat more, not less. The doctor's words were a vindication, a reversal of the curse Isabel had placed on her. Lying there listening to the impossible, wonderful chorus of her children's hearts, Elara Blackwood made a decision. She would not be going to a wellness retreat in Switzerland. She would not be fixed. She would not be broken. Damien had given her an ultimatum. He had no idea she was about to deliver one of her own. But first she had to protect her children. She would tell no one. Not her flighty sister, not her worried mother, and certainly not her husband. This secret was her shield and her sword. For the next few days she would play the part of the compliant wife, buying herself time to form a plan. But her world had been irrevocably, triply, miraculously changed. The game was no longer his. It was hers. The next 24 hours were the most surreal of Elara's life. She returned to the mansion, the secret of 3 heartbeats thrumming within her, a silent orchestra only she could hear. She moved through the cold, opulent rooms with a newfound purpose. The mansion was no longer a cage. It was a temporary hiding place. Her fatigue was no longer a weakness. It was a testament to the incredible work her body was doing. When Damien came home, she was the picture of contrition. It was the greatest performance of her life. "You're right, Damien," she said, her voice carefully modulated to sound defeated. She found him in his study, signing a stack of documents. "I've been emotional. I'll go to the retreat. I've already looked it up. It looks wonderful." He looked up, surprised and pleased by her easy capitulation. "Good," he said, a smug, satisfied smile touching his lips. "It's for the best. I knew you'd see reason." He was so consumed by his own victory that he didn't notice the new light in her eyes, the steel hidden beneath the soft surrender. He thought he was winning, closing the chapter on his problematic wife. He had no idea she was about to rewrite the entire book. Elara spent the rest of the evening in her room feigning a packing effort. In reality, she was on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She researched top-rated multi-birth neonatologists, high-risk pregnancy lawyers, and short-term apartment rentals under her maiden name. She was building an ark, preparing for the flood she knew was coming. That night she slept more soundly than she had in months, one hand resting protectively on her belly. She dreamt of 3 tiny, perfect faces. The next morning, however, the storm broke sooner than she could have ever anticipated. She woke to a dull, cramping ache deep in her lower back. She tried to dismiss it as a side effect of her growing womb, but the ache began to sharpen, wrapping around her abdomen in tightening waves. A sudden, terrifying wetness gushed down her legs, soaking the silk sheets. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through her. It was too soon. Dr. Sharma had said she was only 18 weeks. This couldn't be happening. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, her hands trembling so violently she could barely unlock it. Who to call? Not Damien. He was already at the office in a board meeting that was, he'd told her, critically important. He would see this as an inconvenience, a drama. She couldn't bear his cold dismissal right now. Her finger hovered over the contact for her sister Serafina, but she hesitated. Sarah was kind but prone to panic. She needed calm. She needed a professional. Her finger found the number for Dr. Sharma's clinic. She pressed call. The receptionist answered, her voice calm and professional. Private Medical Clinic. I need to speak to Dr. Sharma. Elara gasped, a fresh wave of cramping making her double over. It's an emergency. Elara. Sterling. My water just broke. The receptionist's professional calm instantly shifted to urgent efficiency. Stay on the line, Ms. Sterling. I'm putting you through to her private line and dispatching an ambulance to your address right now. What is the address? Elara rattled off the address of the Blackwood estate as Dr. Sharma's voice came on the line, sharp and commanding. Elara, talk to me. What are you feeling? Through gritted teeth, Elara described the pains. Okay, Elara, listen to me. Your body is going into premature labor. This is very, very serious, but we are prepared for this. The ambulance is on its way. Do not try to move. Just breathe. While Elara was on the phone a world away, in a glass-walled boardroom downtown, Damien Blackwood was at the peak of his power. He was presenting a hostile takeover bid, his voice confident, his arguments flawless. Isabel Vance sat 2 seats down from him, looking at him with undisguised adoration. She sent him a quick text under the table. Isabel, you're killing it. Dinner at Le Bernardin tonight to celebrate my treat. Damien glanced at the text, a small smile playing on his lips. He was about to close the biggest deal of his career. His wife was handled, packed off to be fixed. His mistress was beautiful and compliant. His world was perfectly in order. He typed a quick reply. Damien, absolutely. 8 p.m. Let's make it a night to remember. He had no idea what a memorable night it was about to become. Back at the mansion, chaos had erupted. The wail of the siren grew closer. The household staff, alerted by the commotion, were fluttering uselessly at her bedroom door. Elara lay on the bed, breathing through the pains as Dr. Sharma instructed her mind, a maelstrom of fear and fierce protective love. It's too soon. Please be okay. Please just be okay. The paramedics were a whirlwind of calm efficiency. They got her onto a stretcher, their voices reassuring, their movements swift. As they wheeled her out of the grand front door of the mansion she had entered as a bride, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the hall mirror. She was pale, terrified, but her eyes held a warrior's resolve. The last thing she did before they loaded her into the ambulance was send a single cryptic text message to the one person she knew she could trust to be her rock, her older sister Serafina. Elara Hospital. Now. Code red. Don't call Damien. The ambulance door slammed shut and the vehicle sped away, leaving the silent, imposing mansion behind. Elara Blackwood, the quiet, compliant wife, was gone. In her place was a mother fighting for the lives of her 3 unborn children. The next time her husband saw her, he wouldn't recognize the woman he thought he knew. The neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, was a world of hushed beeps, soft whirring, and dimmed lights. It was a sacred, terrifying space suspended between miracle and tragedy. And in the center of it, in 3 separate state-of-the-art incubators, lay Elara's entire world. A son and 2 daughters. So impossibly small, their skin translucent, their tiny chests rising and falling with the help of ventilators. They had been born by emergency C-section, arriving in a frantic, chaotic rush, their viability hanging by a thread. The doctors and nurses, led by the formidable Dr. Sharma, had worked with breathtaking skill, a ballet of science and compassion. Elara, weak and aching from the surgery, had refused to rest until she had seen them. Serafina, her face pale and stained with tears, had been by her side, holding her hand, a silent, unwavering pillar of support. "They're fighters, Ellie," Serafina whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she looked at the three tiny forms. "Look at them. They're Blackwoods, all right. Stubborn as their mother." Elara managed a weak smile. She had never felt a love so fierce, so all-consuming. It was a physical force knitting her broken spirit back together, forging it into something new and unbreakable. It was into this fragile sanctuary that Damien Blackwood finally stormed nearly 12 hours after the birth. His board meeting had been a roaring success. The takeover was his. He and Isabel had been deep into their celebratory dinner at the world-renowned Le Bernardin, laughing over champagne and seared scallops, their phones tucked away. It was only when he switched his phone back on in the car that the deluge hit. A dozen missed calls from an unknown hospital number, a frantic voicemail from his head of staff about an emergency, and a string of increasingly panicked texts from Serafina, who had broken her promise in a moment of pure fear for her sister's life. He arrived at the hospital not with the concern of a husband, but with the irritation of a CEO whose perfectly planned schedule had been disrupted. He strode down the corridor, his expensive suit rumpled his face, a thunderous mask of annoyance. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, bursting into Elara's private room where Serafina was trying to coax her to eat some broth. "My housekeeper said you were taken in an ambulance. What was it? A panic attack? Did you fall?" Elara looked at him, at the man whose children were fighting for their lives one floor below and who hadn't even asked if she was okay. The last vestiges of her old deference died. "I was in labor, Damien," she said, her voice quiet but clear as a bell, cutting through his blustering anger. Damien stared at her, utterly bewildered. "Labor? What are you talking about? You're not pregnant." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. You've gained some weight, Elara. We've been over this. The retreat. There is no retreat." Serafina snapped, stepping between him and the bed. "How can you be so blind, so unbelievably cruel?" "Stay out of this, Serafina!" Damien snarled, his eyes still locked on Elara. "Ellie, what is this nonsense?" Elara took a deep breath. "For 6 months you called me fat. You called me lazy. You stood by while your mistress told me to starve myself. But I wasn't getting fat, Damien. I was pregnant." The color drained from Damien's face. Pregnant. The word seemed to suck the air from the room. His mind, so adept at calculating market shares and profit margins, struggled to process this new impossible data point. "Pregnant," he whispered. We weren't even trying. It appears your brand is more potent than you realized," Elara said, her voice laced with ice. A flicker of something unreadable crossed Damien's face. A son. An heir. His legacy. The annoyance began to morph into a different kind of emotion, a possessive strategic interest. "A baby," he said, testing the word. "Well, this changes things. Where is he? Or she?" "Follow me," Elara said. Ignoring Serafina's protest, she pushed herself out of bed, her body screaming in pain, but her will was iron. She shuffled to the door, leading the way to the NICU. The nurse at the entrance looked at Damien, then at Elara, and buzzed them in. Damien stepped into the hushed, dim room, his arrogant swagger faltering in the face of such profound fragility. Elara led him to the first incubator. "This is Alexander," she said softly. "Your son." Damien stared at the tiny baby, at the wires and tubes. He was speechless. An heir. It was real. Then, Elara moved to the next incubator. "And this is Isla." And to the third. "And this is Charlotte." Damien followed her movements, his head snapping from one tiny baby to the next. His face went from pale to ashen. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. 1, 2, 3. Triplets. The word was a choked, disbelieving croak. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't a legacy. It was chaos. It was a medical disaster, a financial drain, a public relations nightmare. It was in that moment of Damien's utter selfish shock that the final actor in this tragedy decided to make her entrance. Isabel Vance, sleek and perfect, in her silver dinner dress, swept into the NICU waiting area, her face a mask of practiced concern. She had grown worried when Damien left their dinner so abruptly. Tracking his location via his phone, a little trick she'd used for months, she had come to offer support. "Damien, darling, I was so worried," she began, her voice carrying into the unit. She pushed past the nurse's protest and stopped dead at the scene before her. Damien looking like he'd seen a ghost, Elara looking like a queen defending her realm, and three glass boxes with babies in them. Her perfectly made-up face contorted in confusion, then dawning horror. "What is this?" she breathed. Elara turned her head slowly to look at the woman who had caused her so much pain. She looked at her designer dress, her perfect hair, her cruel, beautiful face, and she felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. "This, Isabel," Elara said, her voice ringing with the authority of a mother and the finality of a judge, "is what happens when you tell a woman who is unknowingly carrying triplets to eat less." Isabel's eyes widened, her gaze darting between the 3 incubators and Elara's calm, powerful face. The color drained from her cheeks. All her ambition, all her schemes, all her carefully constructed plans to replace the dowdy wife, it all crumbled to dust in the face of this impossible, overwhelming reality. Damien finally found his voice, a voice not of a father, but of a man whose assets were in free fall. 3 of them. My God, Elara. The cost. The complications. My reputation. And that was it. That was the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. Not concern for his children's lives, not remorse for his cruelty, but fear for his reputation. Elara looked from her 3 tiny fighting children to the 2 stunned, selfish adults who had almost cost them everything. A lifetime of silence, of swallowing her pain, of shrinking herself to fit their world, came to an end. "Get out," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it held the force of a hurricane. "What?" Damien stammered. "Get out," she repeated, her gaze unwavering. "Both of you. You are not welcome here. These are my children. You will not bring your poison, your ambition, or your brand into this room. This is a place of healing, and you have no part in it." For the first time in his life, Damien Blackwood was faced with a force he could not acquire, intimidate, or control. He looked at the woman he had tried to break and saw a stranger, a formidable, powerful stranger. He turned defeated and walked out with Isabel trailing silently in his wake, her own gilded world shattered beyond repair. Elara turned back to her children, her warriors. The battle was over. The war for her new life had just begun. The sterile, quiet environment of the NICU became Elara's universe. Days blurred into nights marked only by the changing shifts of nurses and the incremental gains of her children. Alexander, the little fighter, was the first to breathe on his own. Isla, the smallest, had a tenacious grip that belied her size. Charlotte, her quiet observer, would fix her gaze on Elara's face, a silent, profound connection already formed. They were her triplet treasures, and in fighting for them, Elara found a strength she never knew she possessed. Damien predictably responded not with emotion, but with legal strategy. The day after she threw him out of the hospital, a sleek, Armani-clad lawyer appeared bearing documents. Damien wasn't contesting paternity, he was asserting it. He wanted custody. He framed it as a matter of resources he could provide, the round-the-clock care, the best of everything that 3 premature infants would require. The unspoken implication was that Elara, the woman he had deemed unfit, was incapable. It was a declaration of war, but Elara was ready. Her secret research in those final hours had been her salvation. The lawyer she had found, a sharp, empathetic woman named Hannah, met Damien's legal brute force with quiet, devastating precision. The story, as it inevitably would in their high-profile world, leaked. But it didn't leak in the way Damien had feared. Serafina, in a moment of protective fury, had spoken to a single trusted journalist. The narrative wasn't about a tech mogul's surprise triplets. It was about a husband who had relentlessly shamed his wife for her appearance, completely oblivious that she was critically ill with a high-risk pregnancy. It was about a powerful man trying to send a woman carrying his 3 children to a wellness retreat to fix her body. The public backlash was swift and brutal. The story was irresistible: a villainous millionaire, a cruel mistress, and a heroic suffering wife who delivered a miracle. Team Elara started trending. Damien's company stock took a noticeable dip. The board members who had applauded his hostile takeover were now looking at him as a liability. Isabel Vance's downfall was even more precipitous. The "Eat Less" comment repeated in every article became her epitaph. Her carefully curated brand of aspirational glamour was annihilated overnight. She was branded a bully, a homewrecker, a monster. Her PR career was over. The last Elara heard, Isabel had deleted her social media and left the city, vanishing into a well-deserved obscurity. Damien, facing a PR apocalypse, tried to backtrack. He issued a public statement about his profound regret and private family matters. He sent extravagant, absurdly large floral arrangements to the hospital, which Elara promptly instructed the nurses to distribute to other patients. He was trying to buy his way back into a narrative he no longer controlled. After 2 long, arduous months, the day finally came when all 3 babies were strong enough to go home. But they didn't go home to the cold Blackwood mansion. They went home to a sunny, warm 3-bedroom apartment that Serafina had helped Elara secure and furnish. It was a fraction of the size of the mansion, but it was filled with more love and life than those marble halls had ever known. The divorce settlement was surprisingly swift. Faced with Hannah's meticulously documented evidence of emotional abuse and the catastrophic public opinion, Damien's lawyers advised him to settle, and settle generously. Elara didn't want his empire, but she took enough to ensure her children would want for nothing, and that she would never again be dependent on anyone. Life became a chaotic, beautiful symphony of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleepless nights. It was exhausting, relentless work, but it was joyful. Elara, who had felt so purposeless in her gilded cage, now had the most profound purpose in the world. One afternoon, as the triplets were napping in a row in their cribs, a rare moment of quiet descended. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. On a whim, Elara found an old box that had been in storage, a box she hadn't opened since her wedding. Inside were her old tools, her brushes, her solvents, her fine-tipped instruments for restoring art. She picked up a charcoal pencil, its familiar weight settling in her hand. She looked at her sleeping children, their 3 perfect, peaceful faces. Her gaze fell upon a blank canvas she had bought but never used. Without thinking, she began to sketch. She drew Alexander's determined frown, Isla's tiny, curled fist, Charlotte's wide, knowing eyes. Her hand moved with a confidence and passion she thought she had lost forever. The art that flowed from her wasn't about restoring what was old, it was about creating something new. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. The woman Damien had tried to erase was gone. The woman Isabel had tried to shrink had vanished. In their place was Elara Sterling, an artist, a warrior, a mother. Surrounded by the gentle sounds of her sleeping children, her hand moving across the canvas, she was finally miraculously whole. Her life wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something far better, a real hard-won and beautiful beginning. Elara's story isn't just about the shock of delivering triplets. It's a powerful testament to the hidden strength that lies within us, waiting for its moment to ignite. It's a reminder that true value isn't measured by a number on a scale, a designer label, or the approval of those who refuse to see our worth. She was pushed to the brink, betrayed by those who should have protected her, but in her darkest hour, she discovered her greatest purpose. Her journey from a silent, gilded cage to a sunlit apartment filled with the sounds of her 3 beautiful children is a story of incredible resilience and the ultimate triumph of a mother's love. If her story of transformation and empowerment touched your heart, please help us share it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe to the channel for more dramatic stories that find the light in the darkness. Thank you for listening.